Okay, so in this video, we are going to talk about functions with return values. So I already have a file created. Let's take a look at it. So I'm going to cd to 161b. And if I look, I have a folder called assign1. So all my function related files are here. And if we take a look at functions2.cpp, the last time we talked about void functions, functions that don't return anything. So this code demos not void functions like I say here. It demos functions with return values. Okay, so I have two functions here. Let's take a look at both of them. So I have all my includes. I have some function prototypes. I have a function that calculates the pyramid volume. Okay, it takes the user length, width, and height, and it calculates the pyramid volume and returns a double. I also have a function called readdouble that takes a string parameter to validate input from the user. Okay, so here is main. Let's start with our variables that I declared. I declared three variables: user length, width, and height for the pyramid variables and the volume of the pyramid. Okay, then I read user input. I have some lines that I commented out here because this is what I used before I wrote my readdouble function. So without any validation, you could simply see out and you could say cin the three values and just read them all separated by space, right? That's one way to do it. Or you can say, well, this, I'm not doing any data validation, which means if the user enters ABC when you ask them for length or a character, in other words, it would fail. So I wrote a function called readdouble, which will read a double variable from the user and will do data validation and will return a double when it has a good number. So this readdouble function here, if you notice, look at my description, it reads a double number and validate the input. String, which is the prompt, which is my input parameter, is a string. Output, there's no output, an error message maybe, output to the screen. That's what I mean by output. Return is a double. It returns a double value. So in comes a prompt, which is a string, and I call it prompt because it's a prompt, meaning it is what the user is going to prompt, or user is going to be prompted for. That's what that is, okay? So it's a string. Any string can be sent here. And I put it in as a parameter because then the string can be whatever, right? Enter user length, enter user width, enter user height, enter something else. It could be a it could be a variant. It can be flexible, which is why it's a parameter. We declare a local variable called temp equals 0. We output the prompt. So I'm just outputting the prompt here. That's all it's doing. I can call this whatever else if you want. If you want, you can call it prompt string, right? You input the number that the user enters. You read it. Then you check. While not cin says if cin fails, it returns a false. Not cin, the whole thing will become a true. So we are in the loop. That means when cin fails, we are inside the loop. Cin.clear will clear cin. Cin.ignore will ignore 100 or new line, whichever one comes first. New line is a character or 100 characters, whichever one comes first. It's going to ignore means it's going to get rid of everything from the buffer. Then I'm going to output a message that says invalid, please try again, and I have to read the number again. So all four statements are very important for the loop. Without one or the other, it will become an infinite loop, because if you try to run the loop without cin.clear, cin is not reset. It doesn't know how to read once it fails. Cin.ignore, if you don't do that, there's still stuff left in the buffer, and that could cause problems. If you don't read the input again, you could be stuck with the previous input. So you must clear, ignore, output, prompt, and read. And it stays in the loop if things are bad. As long as it's bad, it stays in the loop. When the number is good, cin will be true, the whole thing will be false, it will come out. It will ignore that last new line that the user enters. You type a number and you hit enter. That new line will be ignored. And then we return the number. When the number is returned, it comes here, and every time I call the function, it returns a number. It goes into the left side variable. I call the same function, right, which is the whole purpose of writing a function for reusability. Call the same function, put it into user width. Same function, put it into user height. So I've read user length, width, and height with data validation. Then I send those three parameters to my pyramid volume. User length gets copied here into user length. Let me make this wider. User length right here. This user length is a parameter. This is different memory up here. From here, we copy into here. They don't have to be called the same thing. I just called it the same thing. They could be called parameter length or function length or whatever, right? It makes sense to call it the same thing. This user width gets copied into this user width here. This user height up here gets copied into user height down here. Then we declare local variables called double volume equals 0, base area equals 0. These are local variables inside of the function. Then we take this user length that comes in. Do not put values into it from here. They're already coming in. They already have some values from main. Just use them. User length times user width. You don't want to reset these to 0 or to some of the values from the user. Then the purpose of sending them from main will be lost. So they come in with some values right here. You use them to calculate the base area. You use the height and you calculate the volume. That's why the two local variables, to calculate the base area and volume. And then you return this volume. This volume comes back here and goes into this volume in main. Again, that volume is different. It's a different memory location. What gets returned, I've got to put it in somewhere here. If I don't receive it, I'm throwing it away. So don't throw it away, receive it into a volume in main, and then set the precision and do all that stuff and print it. Okay, so return value has to be used. If you don't use it or if you don't receive it, then the purpose of returning is lost. So then we come here on the right hand side, I change to that folder, to assign 1, and there's my file. I do G++, or I can do G+, I have my shortcut here, G+ functions2 will compile it for me. And then you can run it. Or what you need to do is do your whole thing that says G++ minus wall minus G functions 2.cpp minus O, the name of the executable, functions2. That's the same thing. And then I can run it, // functions2. That runs it. Enter the length of the pyramid, 3.4. And then hit enter, enter the width of the pyramid, 5.6 and 8, whatever numbers you want to put. And it says that's the volume of the pyramid. Okay, so functions with return values, functions that return something.